This is part 2 of my Silksong boss ranking. Part 1, which can be found in the description and in the upper right corner, covered bosses 47 through 31, so be sure to check that video out first, then come back to this one. Today we're entering the middle of the pack as I tackle bosses 30 through 16, but if you the viewer want to have your voice heard, I've officially opened the Silksong community ranking poll, where we'll rank every boss in Silksong by difficulty and quality. Check the description for a link to the Google form where you can read all that information. I'm Billy S, and this is part 2 of my Hollow Knight Silksong boss ranking. Enjoy! At number 30, we have Lost Garmond, fought after accepting the hero's call wish and finding Zaza at the Blasted Steps Bellway station. Old night consumed by black thread. A tragic fate for a once honorable bug. Those void-soaked threads. Their physical might is nothing compared to the corruption they wreak upon a soul. This entry is definitely propped up by the narrative surrounding Garmond, more so than the fight itself. Because if we're ranking solely based on Lost Garmond's moveset, he is incredibly tedious to fight. All of his attacks do double damage due to the void-aspected moveset, making him incredibly deadly, to the point where he finished me off multiple times. His lance drop, while launching 4 void blobs that expand and slash around themselves when they hit the ground, makes him really tough to approach. And when he combos that into his void projectiles, it can feel like you're being forced to thread a needle to actually get damage in. Suddenly, the larger range of his lance becomes a threat, whereas in Act 2, his fight was easier. No, Lost Garmond lands at this point on the list for the narrative arc. He is a character who has the potential to help Hornet throughout her time in Farloom, going up against Morwing in Act 1, being one of the NPCs who can appear to help out in the forum fight at the end of the High Halls in Act 2, and during Act 3 you can see him fighting back against the void-soaked bugs with all of his might. But after encountering him 3 times around the kingdom, you'll receive the hero's call wish, and following a distressed Zaza, you have to slay your former companion. While a surprising amount of NPCs in this game do have happy endings, Garmond is the main NPC that does not. He succumbs to darkness and falls in battle, but not before regaining his senses enough to share some parting words with Hornet, praising her skill, showing how proud he is to see what she's become. It stings though, knowing that if it wasn't for Hornet's actions in Act 2, he would never have befallen this fate. And yet it was the only path they could take to truly free Farloom from the influence of the gods. And Zaza choosing to rest by Garmond's side broke my poor heart. He couldn't bear to leave his old friend even in death, no matter how much I wish I could have scooped Zaza up and whisked him away to live the life that Garmond would have wanted. At number 29, we have the Bell Eater, fought in Act 3 after attempting to access the Bellways for the first time. Long dormant centipede, awoken and enraged by Farloom's crumbling collapse. A monster in the classic form of Tales from my youth. Its slaying was done as much by my fierce traveling companion as by myself. The Bell Eater is a dangerous foe that forces Hornet to dive into the Bellway tunnels in order to combat it, with the giant centipede-like creature cornering us with its gargantuan body. To the left and right of the arena, we're walled off and forced to fight in a fairly enclosed space. The boss has 2 different appendages it can attack with, the head and the tail. The head is the easier of the 2 to deal with, either firing a spray of goop you have to avoid, or using its claws to attack around its immediate vicinity. Both of these attacks are fairly simple, requiring some spacing to deal with. The tail, on the other hand, is the real danger. At first, it fires 2 explosive goopy orbs in different directions, which you can knock away with a well-timed strike. That isn't bad initially, with you having tons of room to work around avoiding his attacks. That is, until you do enough damage to where the boss starts attacking with the head and tail at the same time. Often you'll be dodging one of the boss's attacks, only to stumble headfirst into another, and with the tail firing more and more explosive orbs as the battle progresses, you'll find yourself more and more overwhelmed. The boss can also take breaks to crawl along the ceiling and the floors, forcing you to jump over the Eater as it passes by, while also avoiding the bells falling from the ceiling as well. It's a lot to handle, but if you entered Act 3 with both of the Pale Oil upgrades from Act 2, you should eventually overcome this boss. and the fight comes to a climactic end when your Bell Beast friend comes in at the last second to save you from the Eater, stealing your kill in the process. Which then leads into the reveal that your Bell Beast is actually a mother, and her adorable children are now your equivalent of a Bellway Dreamgate. In terms of rewards, this is one of the best fights in the game. But in terms of everything else, it's a memorable set piece, but not exactly a moveset that sparks a lot of joy. That tail and its explosive orbs are a nasty piece of work, and make fights with the Bell Eater a lot more nerve-wracking than they have any right to be. Just quickly before we move on though, we're trying to reach 50,000 subscribers, so if you enjoyed this video, consider parrying that subscribe button to help us out. I'd seriously appreciate it, and it'll keep you in the know for when part 3 comes out. At number 28, we have the Vault Worm found in the depths of the Vault Nest atop the sands of Karak. Coiled nest of charged worms, assaults intruders with bolts of crackling electricity. Barely a bug, and possessing only basic thought, yet instinct alone proved enough to turn it deadly. Compared to some of the entries we've covered in this series, the Vault Worm is very basic, as it's a boss that doesn't actively attack the player with any physical strikes. Instead, it pops out from the ceiling of its arena and activates one of 2 types of ranged attack, both of which are powered by electricity. You had to do some platforming to even reach this arena, so you saw how the gimmick worked. Areas of the arena will be marked with an incoming AoE, and you need to stay out at these spots to avoid the damage. The circular AoEs are fairly easy to avoid, often spaced in ways where you can either jump and float, or walk to a safe space to dodge them, with the trickier ranged attacks being the Vault Pillars. These attacks see the boss strike down a portion of the arena with a pillar of lightning, with 3 different patterns that can then follow. You have to identify which pattern it is and move to a safe space accordingly, while still finding time to hit the Vault Worm before it moves to its next location. And thus the fight continues with trickier patterns until the boss is down. It's less a boss battle and more of a spatial awareness test, but I happen to like those types of gimmicks, especially as this is one of a handful of spots in the game to use the Vault environmental hazards, which makes it feel more novel. You also get the Vault Filament as a reward, which boosts your damage output of your Silk skills, and if you know about how broken the Silk skills can be in the right hands, you know this is a fantastic tool to have in your arsenal. For having a great reward and a simple yet well-executed fight, it lands here on the list. At number 27, we have Nihilith, who once ruled the Shellwood until her demise, and one of the old hearts needed in Act 3. Ancient heart of Shellwood, connected to all its living things. Her presence would once have maintained the wood's fragile order, allowing the safe passage of bugs across its branches. I don't know how the community feels about Nihilith, but I do have to respect Team Cherry here for going out of their way to create a flawless fight. Oh, you thought I said flawless? No, I meant flawless, as in, where the fuck is the flaw? That's right, do a certain amount of damage and Nihilith destroys the floor, forcing you to fight her while wall climbing and pogoing to not hit the spikes below. And this is the contentious part of the battle, because some players will absolutely relish the challenge of fighting a boss with no safe space to rest, while others will absolutely hate the fact they have to deal with a purely aerial moveset, especially depending on the type of crest you have equipped, as it can change your pogo experience. For me, I never liked these sequences in Hollow Knight during the Colosseum of Fools, and I can't say I like them much more here in Silksong. At least Nihilith's moveset is designed with all of this in mind, which makes the fight feel more fair, with the exception of her sometimes dashing between walls a couple times catching me off guard, or when I'm in an animation. I like the spiked ball attack. I like a little AoE that forces you to retreat quickly with your movement tools. The arced projectiles I can do without because they force you to stay on the other side of the arena, dodging on the opposite wall, which lowers how much you can approach the boss, and that's the problem I have. I don't feel like I'm very good at air aggression, so this fight tends to drag on as I wait for safe openings, and I just don't feel like I'm ever able to wrench control back. At least she has a smaller HP pool to make up for the platforming difficulty, but this is just a taste thing, and this fight isn't to my tastes. Her Guardian's fight is miles better. At number 26, we have Chakra, who ends up being our closest friend during our adventure in Farloom. Warrior cartographer of a tribe from Farloom's edge. Her skills in battle could challenge the kingdom's best. She has lived a mere fraction of my lifetime, and yet her rings prove a ferocious match. As gifted a warrior as I have ever encountered, and one I am fortunate to call a friend. Chakra can only be fought as a boss during the events of Act 2, only if you've finished her questline. You'll find a bell outside of Belhart's Greymoor entrance, which summons her, and you can engage in a friendly duel. Chakra fights with precision, teleporting rapidly around the arena and throwing her rings at you every once in a while to catch you off guard. It can be very tough to get used to, as you have to figure out when she's going to attack versus teleporting again, so you can avoid her rings. On top of this, she doesn't leave a ton of openings, meaning you can often be dodging for quite a while before you find an opportunity to actually strike her. For me, her ring thrust was the best move to counter, as she'll dash towards Hornet from the ground, then remain in place for a short time. Now yes, she can throw a ring back at you as you approach, but if you know it's coming, you can avoid it and capitalize. Lastly, she's got her ring burst, where she'll teleport above Hornet before crashing down, you just gotta dodge out of the way. It's really cool seeing her fight, especially if you had her in your party for the Forum Battle or that one arena in Hunter's March, as you can finally experience what it's like to be on the receiving end of her weapons. Chakra is skilled and fights like no other boss in the game, which makes me very grateful we are on good terms with her. It's also a nice bonus reward for completing her questline, and the journal entry Hornet writes is so sweet. It's good to see Hornet making friends, something she couldn't do during her time looking over Hallownest. I always go out of my way to fight Chakra now before Act 3, and I'm low-key scared that Team Cherry is going to make her harder if there's a God Home DLC just to really mess me up. At number 25, we have the Great Conch Flies, found during the ascent up the blasted steps on the way to the Pinstress's house. Elder Conchfly crowned with a huge coral horn. Once partnered with a mate, they will rarely be seen alone. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Team Cherry knows how to make gank fights incredibly interesting, and the Great Conchflies are a perfect example of this. The Elder Conchflies are like giant drills, able to dive into the ground and burst out at varying points of the arena. You can see where they'll appear based on the dust piles that appear along the walls, and you have to ensure you're not in the way when they zoom by, or you'll take heavy damage. The main challenge is in getting those hits in and not blocking yourself into a corner. Every now and then, one of the bosses will spit out a conch projectile, which bounces around the room, but this is also a great chance to hit the boss and deal a bit of damage before it drills away again. The pair share a health pool as well, so as long as you're damaging them both, you'll overcome them in the end. I love that this fight is all about managing both enemies and keeping track of them, as once you've got that down, the conch flies go relatively quickly. It's all about finding the right times to heal and staying aggressive. It just hits a spot for me that tickles my brain in a positive manner. If only you killed both of them though, because now you've got an angry survivor to deal with later, and I'll be getting to them soon. At number 24, we have the Bell Beast fought during Act 1 in the Marrow. Huge hardbone bug that lives within and travels through the veins of old bells across Farloom. This one has allied themselves with me, either as thanks for their saving or respect for one judged as equal. Whichever the reason, their fellowship is welcome. The Bell Beast is your primary ally for your adventures in Farloom, and yet your quick travel companion was once a boss encounter. You find her twisted up in silk in the Marrow's Bellway station, and once you use the silk spear to free her, a battle begins. Likely due to her assuming you're dangerous because of your use of silk and the silk that initially bound her. She has 3 attacks she can initially pull off. The first is a simple crawl along the floor of the arena, which is great for pogoing off of. The second is her arena-wide leap, where she'll go from one side of the arena to the other, and you have to dash beneath to avoid the damage. And the last is her Bell Burst attack, where she'll launch 2 bells out of the ground that roll in different directions. The biggest challenge of the initial phase is the jump attack, as it's sometimes easy to dodge backwards with muscle memory, which will just get you flattened. And given she does 2 masks of damage per contact, that can prove fatal. At certain points, she enrages, able to cause tantrums that make bells fall from the ceiling at random, while her Bell Burst attack now adds a 3rd bell to the proceedings right above the boss, able to hit players who are too close and unable to move away. and they also add an extra bell from the ceiling following her leap attack. It's a lot of moving parts to keep track of for the second boss fight in the game, and compared to Moss Mother, really challenges the player in order to make progress. I feel like I was much better at the game following the Bell Beast battle, and it taught me to stay calm, learn the moveset, and don't act prematurely, as that will always get you killed in Silksong. Then add that the Bell Beast becomes a permanent ally to the player, along with the adorable purring and the leg shuffling that comes with it, and you've got a fight I remember very fondly. She's not the most important battle in the game, but she is deserving of a middle-of-the-pack finish. At number 23, we have Sister Splinter, fought within Shellwood during Act 1. Imposing old insect, nesting in the heights of Shellwood. Her command of twig and branch ensured no pilgrim ever survived her territory. This one lived long and fed much. The wood will be much safer for their slaying. We've officially reached one of the big early game roadblocks for Silksong, with many players lamenting that Sister Splinter was a fight that rocked their world, and I can see why. She limits the playable space with her ability to summon vine walls, which can cause players to focus on breaking those walls instead of doing damage to the boss. This makes it so that when you break her vine walls, she's already gearing up her triple swipe combo to knock you into oblivion. And fairly early into the fight, she can summon Splinterbarks to support her, as she can't do much herself beyond her melee combo. These are the true danger here, as they fly out of reach, and their spin attack can be very tough to avoid, all while you're trying to avoid Sister Splinter herself. On the plus side though, she can kill her minions if they land in her attacks, so baiting them into their own demises might be a good strategy. I fought Sister Splinter back when those enemies did 2 masks of damage, but now their spin attack only does 1. Thank you Team Cherry, much appreciated. I also used the Reaper Crest for this fight, which gave me a wider swing for damage, and I made liberal use of the Threadstorm ability to get rid of the Splinterbarks and the various vines. It does enough damage to take care of them, giving you an easy time focusing on the boss herself. You just need to remember that using Hornet's tools is viable instead of going needle only the whole time, to the point where I beat this boss on my first attempt and I didn't find her that tough, because it felt like the game gave me the tools needed to win. Threadstorm is your friend, viewers. Use it and Sister Splinter will feel like a breeze, even during her final phase, where she's spawning tons of vine walls to box you in. Beside that, I find her design to be really cool, and I think her mechanics are simple enough for Act 1, but with that twinge of difficulty that pushes the boundaries of what's easily achievable without any needle upgrades. At number 22, we have the Pinstress, fought during Act 3 on one of the peaks of Mount Fay. Blade Maiden of a once renowned warrior sect, survived long beyond the rest of her order. I like her, for her willingness to teach and her spirit still strong, despite a long age spent solitary. She has my respect. Straight up, this is the most blunt Hornet's been about a character in this game. I like her. Short, sweet, to the point, fitting for one who teaches us our needle art. She's fought as part of a wish quest in Act 3, where you find her freezing her tits off on Mount Fay. Now, she's a quirky gal, and that extends to her battle style, which is very floaty, yet fast. She'll often rise into the skies, spending most of her time floating above you or preparing her next move, whether that's throwing a trio of pins to try and snipe you from afar, or whether she's planning to hit you with a classic Nightmare King Grim-style aerial plunge into a ground dash attack. Whatever she throws at you, you've got to be careful. I actually love the way she doesn't waste time with fast slashes or some such that many other melee wielders go with. Instead, she just really loves that dash attack and combos it into jumps, which often combos into triple pins, to create a battlefield that is very unpredictable. This is further enhanced by her wild animations. The way she dodges or the way her eyes look as she fights, it's like taking on a tiger, a creature who is just playing with its prey. And then she breaks out the pin strike, charging her own power up and launching a cross attack at the player. From there, it's a repeat of all her moves in whatever fashion she desires, with your goal simply being to capitalize on her hard-hitting moves to win. Her dash is the easiest move to punish, but her brolly float leaves her open to attacks from below, and if you have the Sting Shard, you can punish her for attempting to flee into the air with your own traps. It's a fun fight, there's a lot of joy to her, and yet I can't help but find her ability to stay out of reach quite annoying. And while she's obviously the blueprint and the originator of the moveset, I actually found the second Sentinel, who uses a variant of the Pinstress's moves, to be more enjoyable, but that's just my personal preference. Also, a boss is going to get knocked down if it's possible to stun them off of the arena, thus ruining the player's ability to capitalize on the stun. Them's the breaks. At number 21, we have Gur the Outcast, fought in Act 3 as part of the Hidden Hunter Wish. Huge yet stealthy Scar, an expert trapper and master of the undergrowth. His tracks and traps, it should have been obvious from the start. This old hunter sought to draw me in. But what reason drove him to test himself so brutally? That answer I suspect I shall never know. Of all the optional fights via wishes, Gur is one of the best, and yet his fight doesn't start in the boss arena. His quest is all about tracking, and you have to follow his tracks through the far fields, which brings you into contact with the traps he's left out for Hornet. So you're actively having to avoid all these spikes as you make your way to his arena, only to get ambushed by a surprise cage at one of the tracking points, and dropped into battle. Really well done on this one, Team Cherry, I didn't expect it, and I like that for repeat playthroughs you can simply skip ahead to his arena without following the trail of traps from the start. Gur doesn't attack with melee, instead focusing on his traps to ensnare Hornet. It's a real hunter versus hunter moment, and I love that dynamic. You have to weave through his barbed traps, setting them off safely, and waiting for the right moment to dive back in and get your hits with the needle. Though I suspect it's more fulfilling to use your own traps in response, creating a game of cat and mouse as you both try to outdo the other. Aside from this, he can summon spikes from the floor at certain intervals, which you need to dodge away from, whilst still avoiding his prior dangers. And throughout, you have to keep a careful eye on his movement, as whether he jumps, burrows away, or slides across the arena determines your movement to avoid him and the 2 masks of damage he can deal. Gur goes down relatively easily once you hit the flow, with the only hiccup being a singular flurry of traps he does towards the end of the fight that can catch you off guard. But I think it's just the fact that we're fighting another hunter who knew how to lure Hornet to his den, and who wanted to test himself against a pale being that makes him so fun. You even see his prior victims in a side room after defeating him, as well as the stand where you would have been strung up had Gur been victorious. Such a fascinating boss that we learn so little about. If the collector from Hollow Knight was into taxidermy, it would be Gur. At number 20, we have the 4th Chorus, fought in the Eastern Farfields after obtaining the Drifter's Cloak. Towering iron automaton, driven by rotor and cog. A terrifying achievement of Farloom to build a construct so large and yet so nimble. I think we all knew when we walked past the inanimate 4th Chorus for the first time that we'd be coming back to deal with him very soon. How fitting that the only way to then return to the rest of the game after obtaining the cloak is to take him down in combat. Yet this towering beast has a whopping 500 hit points and can only be damaged by smacking its head, which creates a marathon of a fight. And you can tell that Team Cherry are proud of this one because the frame rate of 4th Chorus's attacks is buttery smooth in comparison to everything else so far. As far as the attacks go, 4th Chorus is actually very basic. It has a swipe attack where it can horizontally swipe across the arena to hit Hornet, and a slam attack where one of its upper arms will slam down into the arena in an attempt to crush Hornet. This will also sink the platforms the attack hits into the lava, which will return after a set period of time. What I like is that the arms that are about to attack are clearly indicated with a little glow, giving the player ample time to reposition. It's all about staying aggressive, finding your openings to hit the head, and not panicking. The only danger in this fight is the lava itself, which does 2 masks of damage without the magma bell, and with your Drifter's Cloak you can avoid the swipe attack by hanging in midair. Its final attack is a rock dance, where the boss will slam the ceiling of the arena to cause rocks to fall in up to 4 waves, with the boss weaving in other attacks towards the latter waves. It can be tough to manage at first, but it's impossible to beat this boss by accident, so if you've beaten 4th Chorus, it's because you learned the moveset. The final phase in this fight, though, is where it gets really cool. It destroys the 2 outer platforms of the arena, penning you in, and thus you have an intense race to the finish line as you strike the head and dodge attacks while being careful of the smaller arena size. This is how both I and my partner finished the fight, getting its HP down from 200 to 0 in record time. However, some of you may have noticed the updrafts on the sides of the arena. On my second playthrough, I chose to ride those updrafts, only to discover explosive rocks above the boss, and if you blow them up, you can hit a third final rock which will drop onto the boss, instantly defeating it. The fact that there's this cinematic way to win the fight, and yet Team Cherry was also cool with people just doing it normally but with the harder arena conditions, is so cool, and is the main reason that lands 4th chorus in my top 20. Definitely one of the most memorable early game fights for the right reasons, although if you manage to make it to Act 3 without ever having fought this boss, it'll actually despawn and you'll get its journal entry automatically, though the chances of people doing that are exponentially slim if you're not a speedrunner. At number 19, we have Lace's first encounter at the dry docks towards the beginning of Act 1. Manic fencer who delights in battle. Wow, Hornet, that's truly one of the observations of Silksong right there. But then that does sum up Lace's initial character quite well. A delightfully insane fencer who seemingly delights in the pain inflicted upon Hornet, and who holds quite the grudge. Lace, ironically, is the Hornet of Silksong, taking the role that Hornet originally played in Hollow Knight, but with a deadlier twist. And yet her moveset, while simple in comparison to some of the more mechanically intense bosses, is deceptively deadly. What I love about Lace is that you have to think about what you're doing while fighting her, as she comes equipped with a counter that is extremely difficult to avoid without all of your movement tools. Just her basic melee combo is already deadly enough, able to do 2 masks of damage if you're caught by both swings. She'll then often combo it with her movement tools to close distance with Hornet, be it a dash that covers the arena requiring a jump to avoid, and a pogo if you want to punish, or a jump into the air before diagonally diving towards Hornet. This is the move you can punish the most, as if you understand her momentum, you can predict where she'll stop and attack accordingly. If she counters you, she'll dash forwards and do a series of slashes that takes 2 masks off, punishing the player, but also teaching you not to mindlessly attack. It won't work on her. And all of this while having strong movement tools to make healing pretty difficult. My strategy for a mid-fight heal was to bind while in mid-air, but on the edge of the arena, as most of the time she'd have no reason to attack me there with her current moveset. Lastly, she has an attack the wiki has called Moulinet, where she'll highlight a white circle in the arena. You need to avoid that spot, as she'll begin a Virgil DMC-style judgment cut in that area before slamming to the ground. It's when she slams down that you can punish her for a few hits, but if you're caught in this attack, you'll take 2 damage from the slices and a 3rd mask from the slam, making this one of the most deadly attacks in the game. But with Lace's generally fragile nature, staying aggressive and overwhelming her leads to a quick victory. The fun of Lace is how this isn't your only encounter with her, and each new battle improves on a moveset that you've learned to create encounters that, at least for me, just get better and better. I know some people dislike that Lace has 3 fights in this game, but when her moveset is one of the most fun to battle against with Hornet's base crest, and the game has 40 plus bosses anyway, I think some people are just complaining to complain. At number 18, we have the Raging Conch Fly, found atop the sands of Karak after defeating the Great Conch Fly's boss at the Blasted Steps. To pair with another is a base instinct, and one that brings some bugs great joy. I once sought similar union, but of my own mates, none could match my lifespan. When we left one of the elder conch flies alive, I knew it would be back. Little did I know that the Raging Conch Fly would prove to be one of the most difficult fights of Act 2, as the boss has a much higher health pool than before, and was a struggle for me even with multiple needle upgrades. The first half sees the boss using similar moves to its previous fight with a few key differences. The drill dash is much faster now and always targets Hornet's location. This means that healing is more difficult, as there's a chance the boss can just burst up from beneath your feet to damage you out of your binding. It still has the Conch Spit attack, except the conch is massive now, with the larger hitbox being a real danger in the less vertical arena, and the boss can spit 2 of them if you get unlucky with your pattern. Naturally, all of the attacks deal 2 masks of contact damage, so you've got to be ready, and you can't stay in one spot for too long. But then Phase 2 happens, where the boss summons a series of conch flies to help in battle. They can either attack as a drill horde, with conch flies burrowing out of the room at random points to try and surprise Hornet, or you have to deal with a drill barrage combo, where the boss appears on one side of the arena alongside 3 conch flies, which will fire themselves horizontally at Hornet, followed by the boss. The smaller enemies are projectiles more than actual minions, so you have to keep your focus on the boss and not let yourself get overwhelmed, as the Elder Conch Fly will also continue to cycle through his previous attacks. It's just a lot to keep track of, and straddles the line of feeling like too much, especially with a somewhat lengthy boss run back. It's not difficult, but it is time consuming, and for a boss whose strategy is to overwhelm the player, that can breed a bit of malcontent. Not with me though, I really like this fight, and the way the enemies are used in the attacks, as opposed to being autonomous beings, really adds to the idea that the Elder is commanding them, and by taking out the Elder, you overcome them all. Also, the journal entry confirms that Hornet fucks. That's kinda crazy though. At number 17, we have four brothers Cygnus and Gron fought in the deepest part of the Deep Docks. Elder Overseers of the Deep Docks, responsible for the oversight and punishment of lesser workers. Lost in the madness of the haunting, they still commanded the endless excavation of their caves. This is a really interesting ranking for me, as I'd argue that Cygnus and Gron are less like bosses and more like very hard regular enemies, but with the presentation and the way their fight works out, I ended up really vibing with their whole package. It starts with you encountering Gron earlier in the level, thinking he's just a really fast regular enemy, one that caught me off guard as you can see from my footage. Then, towards the end of Deep Dock's lower stratum, you run into Cygnus ordering his minions around. Starting the fight, the arena will be surrounded by lava on both sides, which forces you into battle, and Cygnus will use his staff to try and win. Quick note, put the magma bell on. Both bosses have attacks that are imbued with fire, which will do one mask if you have the bell, and it helps when dealing with surprise lava, such as the lava flow in the final portion of the fight that coats the center of the arena. Cygnus has two attacks he can break out, a ranged boomerang throw, which you can take advantage of by hopping over it and hitting the boss before dodging the rebounding weapon, and a slashing combo you can dodge backwards from. His other strategy is to summon minions, but as I discovered while researching for this video, he only does this 3 times in the fight, summoning a Flintstone Flyer, then a Smoke Rock Sifter alongside another Flintstone Flyer, and then lastly, Four-Brother Gron, which starts the gank portion of the fight. Gron only has 2 attacks, a spear throw which will always target Hornet's position from when he reaches the height of his jump, with the spear exploding a short while after it hits the floor, and an explosive dive where he'll slam into the ground and cause an explosion. Combine his 2 attacks with the 2 attacks of Cygnus, and you have a 4-attack moveset that complements each other really well. You'll never have the pair of them overlapping attacks in an unfair manner, which I really appreciated. And once one four-brother goes down, the other begins to play defensively, activating a lava flow in the center of the arena and going exclusively for their ranged attacks unless Hornet gets too close. It plays around with the story that they're in over their heads and they're pulling out all these tricks, but they can't quite avoid Hornet's wrath. I also like that, similar to the enemies of the Deep Docks, their helmets protect them from pogo attacks, which forces you to find ways to attack them head-on, thus forcing you to engage more with their movesets. Do I wish they had a slight bit more variety, or an attack that utilized the pair of them? Yes, which is why this boss doesn't land any higher, but for what it is a really good gank fight. And at number 16, we have Morwing, the Scourge of Greymoor, and another roadblock for players in the early game. Winged might beast, bred large to catch workers who once tried to flee their tasks. With its wranglers long dead, the Morwing stalk the towers of Greymoor, feasting on passing pilgrims and tenders alike. Morwing is a boss I have a very complicated relationship with, but to explain that, I need to talk about his moveset. He starts off with 3 attacks, a swoop where you simply jump, pogo over the boss for damage and reposition for his next attack, a series of quick swipes you need to dodge back from, otherwise you'll be caught in a double damage diagonal attack, and lastly a blade toss where it creates a spinning blade of air that you have to avoid. This seems fine, I really like the idea of the wind blades, and the other 2 attacks have fair telegraphing that makes them learnable. Then phase 2 hits and the wind blades get more prominent in the moveset. He'll now follow up his swoop with an extra blade aimed back at Hornet. The blade toss move now has 2 projectiles, the first the same as the first phase, but the second curves back towards Morwing and then into the ground. It's a very devious trajectory that catches most players off guard when learning the fight. Lastly, it has the inverted blade toss, where it flips itself over, then fires a blade to the left and right, which circle around the boss to the ground, clink against each other, and travel along the floor and out of sight. These blade moves are tough, learnable, but extremely accurate. And when I played Silksong the first time, they did 2 masks of damage per hit. This was, in my opinion, an awful difficulty progression that felt far too oppressive for its early placement in the game, to where I grabbed the nearby Garmond and Zaza to help me overcome the giant bug. As it turns out, the fanbase agreed, with Team Cherry nerfing the boss's wind blades to only do 1 mask of damage in a patch, and having refought the boss since, it makes a world of difference. The fight is so much more enjoyable as a result, and I find the challenge of dodging the wind blades to be unironically a ton of fun. But Moorwing is extra interesting because there are multiple variations to his fight. If you complete the Flea side quest before triggering his boss encounter, the Fleas will take up residence outside of Bellheart where you would normally fight him in Act 1. This moves his boss fight to Act 2, where you can face him outside the Bellway station in Greymoor. This allows you to get more upgrades to prepare for the fight, which makes Moorwing far more manageable. It might be my preferred choice moving forwards. But if you want to suffer, don't fight Moorwing until you trigger Act 3, where the boss will become black-threaded, doubling its health and giving it an abyssal attack on top of its regular moveset. Now, I'll never fight this variant because I'm not psychotic, but the fact it exists is incredibly funny to me. Moorwing is such an interesting fight whether you battle solo, with Garmond and Zaza, or depending on which act you fight him in, and with the nerf in difficulty, it became more fun as a result, and almost broke into my top 15. Almost. And that's my list. Do you agree with the bosses in this part of the video? Let me know which bosses you think are going to be in my top 5 in part 3. I want to give a quick shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. It's $4.99, you get early access to future videos, you get a Soul Level 1 run of Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3, which is great fun, really enjoying recording those. You can follow me on social medias if you want. I've got Blue Sky, I've got Twitch, I've got Discord, all good places to go, and I stream on YouTube almost every single week, so you could come and say hi. Maybe I'm live right now, you never know. Thanks for watching, guys, parry that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time for another video. Adios.